Good afternoon. It's the very last session before lunch, and I'm delighted to present a very wonderful panel. We've got a series of different perspectives on automation and AI here. We've got people from services providers. We've got the enterprise resource planning platform, SAP perspective. We have Telematics, and we have a niche automation and AI provider as well. So I think we may as well get started. I think just before I start, there was one thing that I was looking at in our data the other day, and that was in our enterprise insights, our ICT enterprise insights. It's really interesting to see the progress that's happening with deployed AI. There are so many people reporting actual deployed AI at this point in time. And not only that, it's quite clear that the plans are in place, not just at a grassroots level, but right from the very top of the organization, or at a very minimum from the heads of departments. So I think we're going to have a few conversations here, a few questions to put to the panel, and we'll hit what's most exciting about what's happening today and where we think it's going to head in the future. So on the very right, we have David Snelling from Fujitsu, who has worked in academia. He's been a lecturer in the past, and he's also been working in the lab. But now, as I understand it, your challenge is to take what's been worked on in the lab all these years and bring it out to commercial reality.
Yep, that's the basic goal, particularly with AI in the last sort of 18 months, is to push that technology back out into the business and bake it in.
Fantastic. And next up, we have Rob Scott, who joins us from Commerzbank. And Rob is our representative from the coalface. So after acquisitions happen, and there's a lot happening in the back office of banks, you're the one that's actually putting this technology, automation and AI, to work to get things working better, not just cost reduction, but all sorts of other things too. So there's many banks listed here in your bio. Here's a long history of banking.
Yeah,
and
a long history of working for some dinosaurs, which are hopefully transforming into digital enterprises.
Hopefully. Yeah. So next up, we have Maggie Buggie from SAP, who's leading SAP's digital innovation services business globally. Maggie was recently named one of the world's first top 50 edge computing influencers by Data Economy magazine. And she's also the 2013 winner of the Women in the City Technology Category Award in recognition of her achievements. Thank you. Delighted to have you here, Maggie. And next we have Jonathan Hewett. So you're representing Telematics, which is glorious data, machine-generated data in fantastic quantities. And that's all making a lot of changes for the insurance industry.
Exactly. I mean, we're transforming for the age of the connected consumer and obviously connected insurance. So it's a data-driven business. The more insights we can garner from the data, the better the results for the insurance companies that we work with and ultimately the end consumer.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. And last but not least, we have Chris Gayner, who's here from Symphony Labs. Symphony Ventures is an automation specialist from the services perspective, especially robotic process automation historically, and now moving into intelligent automation as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Does that cover you all?
Yeah, so my role looks at the world just outside of process automation into more artificial intelligence and how those two worlds collide for enterprises.
Fantastic. And you're moving toward platforms as well.
We are launching a platform very soon, which is bringing all that good stuff into a single place where people can consume it as they would any as a service. So very interesting time for us as a business.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thanks all for being here. So to start off, could we stick with today, what's happening so far? And what do you feel is most exciting about what's been achieved with the technologies that we have as we have them today? Would you like to start there, David?
Yep. This is what I get for being on the far right. Oh, wait a minute. I'm not on the far right. No, so one of the things that I find most fascinating about the AI is that it works best when it embeds into the business line. So as a traditional IT service provider, Fujitsu is not as accustomed to talking to the business lines as to talking to the IT services within the enterprise. But AI is a conversation that happens with the business line. And so the highlight one for me in the last sort of 12 months has been, these turbines that they use to manufacture, wind turbines for the offshore power generation. The manufacturing process of these 75 to 100 meter long wind blades is very manual. And so after each one's manufactured, they have to inspect them. They do an ultrasound inspection, 8 channels down 100 meters of thing, and then some poor soul goes through and looks at all the ultrasound images and goes, oh wait, that one needs patching there. And it's about 8 hours per blade. So we rolled up with the AI toolkit, went for a walk through the factory. That was the best part, walking through the factory. Sure enough, there is a way we can now take the images generated and identify in sort of the AI terminology. We get about what's called about 16% false positives, which means these are things that look suspicious, but the expert still needs to look at it. So you don't, the expert's job is still there, okay? But the other 80+%, he doesn't have to look at. And the target there is, it's got to be a 0% net false negatives. And that's where we are. So this is one's exciting for me. It's AI that's really embedded into the business side. It's doing value for the customer of tremendous value. And it has only made the life of the individual better. He goes home a lot more relaxed now. And he was the bottleneck. It's an on-site job that has to be done on-site. And these factories are not where you can just get in ultrasound engineers.
Yeah, so that's delivering a
just
massive
don't-
shortcut.
Yep.
Saving him.
And 80% time reduction, that's good.
That's good. That's good. Okay. Rob, how about you? What are you finding in banking in the back office? What can be done today?
So banking, as you'll be aware, needs to go through quite a transformation. The technology, for the most part, particularly in the back end, is quite aged. There are some good studies in recent years that puts some of this technology well north of 30 years old.
Yeah.
So the need for transformation and digitalization is all the rage at the moment. For us, with respect to AI, we look at it where there is a lot of repetitive, mundane processes with very predictive outcomes, similar to what you just described, where we're not looking at it just from a cost perspective, but really it's how do we enhance the client experience. So for, today we have a small army of people coming in, operating on Excel spreadsheets just to compute the answer to be able to talk to a client some hours later. So any way of streamlining that so that we can help the client more and achieve a better client satisfaction and just spend more time solutioning with the client is where we look to implement AI opportunities.
I always love when people talk from the coalface and mention the Excel spreadsheets that are effectively gluing large enterprises together.
Well, having worked in banks for the past 25 years, you'd be surprised that the biggest single enterprise-wide thing is Excel in banks. Yeah. And actually, when you really break it all down, you're doing the very same things day in, day out. So if there's a way of applying robotic process automation to that, it's enhancing to the person. It gives them better purpose, it gives the clients a better experience, and that's what we're looking to do in the banking.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Rob. Maggie, how about you?
Well, my job is all about helping our customers make money out of these intelligent technologies. So unsurprisingly, the ones I'm most interested in, that I find most exciting, are the ones that are helping our customers actually either make money or save money. So I'm thinking, and we've very much moved out of the theoretical application of AI and intelligent technologies into really driving customer success. So for me, the kind of examples that really excite me are if you take the Queensland Government of Australia, where we're using machine learning and predictive analytics to help them increase tax revenues from their citizen base. I'm thinking of AXA Insurance, where we're using chatbots to help them manage peak flows around insurance renewals. I'm thinking about SFR, French telco, where we're using chatbots and artificial intelligence in helping them with core customer relationship management and account management. And obviously SAP, we try to be the biggest customer of our own stuff, and we've taken out 50% cost in our core finance processes by using automation and artificial intelligence. And I could go on, but that's just some of the ones that I'm very excited about.
That sounds super. Thanks for that. I do have one little request, though. Could you not work with HMRC on the increasing time? I don't think any of us
Miriam?
really want
Everyone,
that.
we believe tax collection can be a beautiful experience by applying some of
Know
the
about
thinking
that.
from the consumer space into the experience of what it takes to fulfill your tax requirements.
Wow, okay. So how about you, Jonathan? What's happening in telematics?
So, I mean, we live in the world of connected cars, and there's over 1 billion vehicles on the road. Around about 800 million of them are insured, thankfully. So, in terms of an addressable market for what we do, it's a vast opportunity. But the challenge is really about adoption. Opposite my office in Lombard Street, there's one of the blue plaques that you see as you move around London. And this one is actually the home of the original Lloyd's of London coffee shop, the historical home of insurance, where the merchants of the day would sit and talk about ships and routes and captains. And the reality is car insurance hasn't changed much. People still think about the type of car, the experience of the driver, and the types of miles they do.
The postcode.
We're in the postcode, exactly. What we're doing them is giving them a multi-dimensional picture of somebody's individualized driving behavior. We can detect crashes in the absolute moment they happen, and we can reconstruct accidents. And at the same time, we can pass all of that information back to the end consumer to give them a connected experience. So in the age of the quantified self, when people want to pay for their lunch, not the guy at the other table having the champagne and oysters, we've got something that's very, very compelling. Now, when we start to think about our customers and how they adopt it, Maggie's dead right. It has to be built and driven by a very strong business case. And we see improvements in combined ratio up to 18%. And those insurance companies, some very large insurance companies, have about 30% penetration of insurance telematics right now. But the global average is 2%. So as we start to sell this to the clients, and we start to talk to them about the advantages of using data and using data techniques to improve the entire workflow of their business, that's what really kind of gets me up in the morning and excites me.
So do you think that we are at the point where people can be treated as markets of one? Are we at that point of personalisation yet, or how far away from it are we?
Absolutely. We do that now for some clients who are paying their insurance premium based on the miles they drive and how they drive. And before you sort of start to get really worried about it, this is entirely option. People cannot opt in to pay their insurance premium on one of these types of policies. And they can use the hints and tips to become a better and safer driver.
Okay, nice. Thanks for that. So Chris, how about you? What's looking good at the moment with today's technology?
Yeah, and from us, we take a process automation view. But why we do that is adoption. So when we're looking at large enterprises, banks, telecoms, media companies, the need and the want for AI is there. The data, the robustness around data management, the tools to manage data, the fundamentals to help them think about data in the right way is not. So what we do is we look at companies, what they're trying to achieve, focusing on the business case. Is it aspirational, like Simon said this morning, or is it more cost savings basis? And the reality is a lot of enterprises are looking at how do they think about the cost base at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's not the exciting bit, that's the reality. Yeah. So the exciting bit is actually when we're looking at them, they want AI, but they need a path to AI.
Yeah.
So actually RPA is really interesting and really exciting because we're looking at a market now. We've got 3 unicorns. One is the fastest growing technology company in history, I think the quote was yesterday.
That's what they're saying.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
So we're looking at those as an application in the organization. And what fundamentally it does is if you can think about automating processes and things that are happening in a business, there's data sentiment that falls out of the bottom of that. And actually you're creating data without having to go off and find data. So looking across Microsoft or Google or Amazon's image database for invoices or pay slips, you're not going to find much. So what you need to do is you need to create that data, and actually RPA, putting that in first, gives you that data sentiment where you can actually say, how would we now bring in AI? Again, what Simon mentioned in terms of to access the outliers, and how do we think about, how do we get automation as a concept into our business rather than AI versus RPA versus just digitizing the front end. And so that's exciting for me to think about. There is a tool for each of those bits. And we call it our intelligent automation toolkit. So it's, you break it up away, stop calling it AI, and actually take it for what it is. It's a toolkit of things that you can compile to access
Lots of little things that will ultimately join together.
And
sounds like you have the makings of a maturity model going there.
Well, the one I just saw a minute ago looked very familiar, but it's exactly that. And I think clients, they see AI. And they want AI. And we're already seeing in, especially in Scandinavia, where they're really early adopters of IP soft, they're really early adopters of chatbots. The reality is they're multi-million-pound programs that have been running for 2 years, and they get to the end and they realize, again, we heard it before, actually we could just offshore this and get someone to do this in a low-cost country, and we're back to the outsourcing market. So what we need is there's a reality set here, and that's the exciting bit, is actually seeing the light bulb in someone in front of us saying, oh, I get it now. AI isn't this magical thing that we plug in. It relies on data and it relies on tools and systems, and actually helping them through that process is exciting.
And there's lots of stepping stones along the way, and data is massively problematic in large enterprises. Data is polluted, it is messy, it is unstructured, it is siloed, it is everything that you wouldn't want it to be, which is why I'm so excited about your telematics data. It's lovely, lovely data. But let's move on then to where we think things are going to go in the future. So if to keep in the interest of time, if you could give maybe one or two of what you think will be the most promising or the most exciting applications for large enterprises in order to get benefit back to their businesses.
Okay, so what I'd say is that some of the two areas that are going to be most interesting in the near future. One is this notion of transparency and explainability of AI. In terms of like a maturity model, I think there are actually 3 categories. There's pure transparency, which industry won't be happy with because that just shows everybody exactly how you do it. And then there's this explainability, which is the thing that's hard to do for deep neural networks, but easy to do for decision trees. That's fine, that'll happen. But there's this other category that I think is really critical, which is what I call justifiable. And it's where you use an intuition or something from the AI and then build in an automated, usually some kind of knowledge base, and then from the knowledge base extract a justification. So I think that kind of integration to deal with the borderline between what is explainable and what is actually just, we don't know how we got this answer in the first place, but we know it's the right answer. Let me just stop there. There'll be plenty of time for other people.
Okay, thank you.
For me, I think the biggest transformation will be in data, understanding data better. You only have to look at every big financial institution or bank at the moment. They have a head of big data and advanced analytics. If you think about the sheer amount of data that's there of the people that we bank and work with, being able to consume that in a far greater quantity, to correlate that in a different way, will probably, in my view, drive the next products and services. And then bolting onto that will be, the various technologies, whether it be blockchain technology, whether it be robotics or AI. You need the structured data. And one thing that banks historically have been very poor at doing is structuring that data in a good way. Even the most simple functions in banks sometimes have hundreds of systems and interconnectivity, and they all consume data in a slightly different way. So I think if we can get a handle on the data components and tailor that to a richer client experience, that will be where banks head. And certainly, from our bank and others, that's when we talk about being a digital enterprise going forward. Those are the type of things that we're doing in the same way that, I get frustrated when I'm on the train and the signal drops, or you can't get 4G or something like that. We want things instantly, and we don't have that in banking today, and that's what we're driving towards. Just a really richer experience that enables, quite frankly, the user to be more in control of what they want to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm curious to know, though, in banking, do you think that the realization has hit home at a senior level that this is a long-term investment?
Yeah,
there may not be visible results instantaneously.
I was having this discussion the other day. I think the culture in organisations is changing. Certainly, I speak from my own organisation. We have that culture right at the very top, and they are constantly and relentlessly driving digital change through the organisation. I see a lot of other people talk about it and run all these pilot schemes and, agile, learn fast, fail fast, and try and implement all these technologies, but the culture isn't there. So I think that is when people get their heads around that, and you get that from the very top all the way through, that's when you drive change. Otherwise, what you end up with, and what we see today is, and I'm sure many fintechs and solution providers are frustrated about the lack of progress in banks. Mm-hmm. It's because if you don't have that culture and tone from the top, you just address pocket silos, and actually they all need to be interconnected to work properly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. Maggie, how about you?
Very much the embedded intelligence of everything, and how that is underpinning the fusion of industries and the business possibility that represents. So what I mean by that is, say at SAP, we're now embedding intelligent technologies into all our flagship products as we move forward aggressively, to be quite frank, with making our customers intelligent enterprises and all the integration that supports that. But if I think about the conversations that I'm having with customers now, about, say, a lot of our utilities customers are thinking about a future when their consumer are producing more and trading more energy than they are. Mm-hmm. And they're thinking about how do technologies such as AI, blockchain, predictive analytics, how do they help them create new and different service-led business models? I'm thinking of the manufacturers and the consumer products companies that we're working with that are going direct to consumer and that are using that insight to then package and target their manufacturing processes. I'm also thinking about how intelligent use of these technologies are breaking down silos, that many customers who have invested heavily on the front end around systems of engagement and infusing those systems and front end processes with these technologies are now learning really fast that if you can't connect that insight and that consumer promise that you've made in the front end through your converged business and IT operating model and right into your on-demand supply chain, so that if you're a consumer products company, that you can actually be clear on what your processes are farm to fork. Mm-hmm. All you've done is make a promise to your consumer that you have to hand crank right throughout the enterprise. So again, what I'm most excited about in the very short and near term is this convergence of industries and knowing as well the type of use cases we're bringing to market about where the pockets of value and the real opportunities for value creation are being made. And from a consumer perspective, personally, I'm very excited about the retail industry and how, working with my favorite fashion brands, I will soon be able to sit at home on my digital channel and I'll be able to look at the latest lines from my favorite designers, and I'll be able to see those tailored and personalized to my size, my requirements, my existing wardrobe and what I've bought from that line, and have the right offers tailored to me. So
that's really
business-wise, excited about the money coming out of industry, and from a personal perspective, super stoked about what's happening in retail.
Fantastic. Great answer. Thank you. How about you, Jonathan?
So I think the first thing I'd say is beware the chairman's wife syndrome, because the answer is always sort of AI, but what was the question? So I think being very clear about the problem that you solve in industry and in insurance, it's about pricing risk, managing and paying claims, and retaining customers. It's pretty simple and straightforward. If you can apply your intelligence across that value chain, if you like, then you can drive out some benefits. I think that's kind of the first thing. The second thing I think is innovation, because so many firms are looking and thinking about how do they innovate and maintain a relevance in this digitally connected world that we all live. And I think that then starts to get very exciting when you consider platforms. So we have a platform based model. So we can work with the largest players in analytics globally, the SaaSes of this world. But we can also work with any guy who's got a really smart idea that can come and think about the data that we have and deriving a new algorithm or a new model, or improving the detection of crashes, or how we might think about reconstructing accidents in the future. So driving that path to continual innovation, which I think so many organisations, we see it in tenders now. You know, they think they want a telematics service provider. Actually, what it is they need is an innovation partner for the future. So I think that's probably the most exciting thing for me.
Yeah, we seem to be at this peculiar point now where on the one hand the possibilities are almost infinite or endless, but that's terribly confusing. So it's the problem solving.
But yeah, I think that's right. And I think this is, you know, I'm an old guy, and you know, I was doing direct marketing in the early 90s, and a lot of the principles we used then are the same now. You know, how do we make it simpler, easier, cheaper for a consumer to benefit from a service? And if you start looking through that simple lens, then apply some of this really smart technology, what you actually find is you can just get there more quickly and more accurately.
Absolutely. Great, thanks for that. Chris, how about you?
So I think aspirationally, there's this idea that I'm wrestling with is looking into the future. The concept of a business has fundamentally changed.
Yeah.
As a person with an idea, I'm an entrepreneur, we're all entrepreneurs, I bring an idea, a blueprint, and put it somewhere, and I have all these tools and technologies, and the network economy's kicked in, and all that stuff starts to work really neatly, and all I need to do is have an idea, and I can build a business very quickly. So it's this concept of an autonomous business almost. It changes everything. The reality, I think, is, so I sit on the all-party parliamentary group for AI within the UK, and the reality is what happens on the way.
To mention that.
That's okay, I got there. What happens on the way? What happens when we are releasing hundreds of thousands of hours for an organization as part of automation when it kicks in? What happens to the disrupted people in our organizations and our communities? So aspirationally, I think that would be fantastic. I think the realities of how do we get there actually is more exciting. So we're working with organizations, or we're engaging with organizations like Reemploy, where they work with autistic and unable folk to work in a standard organization setting where their skills are perfect for the AI world. Tagging images, helping to understand and build frameworks around these things where high repetition is needed still. How do we solve those problems as we move towards this environment? I think, again, aspirationally, I think we can all talk about AI, and we all talk about the idea of this is the wonderful thing up here, and we forget that there's a whole bunch of steps we need to go through first, and it's people, it's adoption, it is the data, it's all that stuff. We won't get there. We won't even get to basic AI. I talked to someone the other day, a large brand. They have 34 POCs happening in all areas, blockchain, IoT, everything. And so I asked the question, how many of those are running in production? And there's one. Guess what? It's RPA.
That's good going. Oh.
It's one bot doing one very simple process, and because they have to build all that business case up to say, now we're going to start automating other areas like RFID scanning, like smart contracts, like quantum computing. I mean, trying to get their head around the concept, let alone them adopting towards that is mind-blowing. So I think aspirationally, I love the idea, and it's great to talk about it. I think the reality is we need to think about people, culture, adoption, data. There's just so much to think about.
Yeah.
For me, that's the future, is dividing that up and saying, how do you attack each of those? And we're seeing lots of different companies spur up out of those to say, well, we're going to look at data, we're going to look at people, we're going to look at this. I think bringing that all together, the platform, is the thing that I think is the most immediate exciting thing for me. How do you allow people to access all those different pillars and consume it without having to build everything themselves? And it comes back to that build and buy conversation.
And I think we need to be thinking a little more creatively at the moment as well, that yes, there is going to be disruption. Yes, some of the jobs as we know them today are going to disappear. But there's way more new stuff coming that we need to get our head around. Which brings me actually quite nicely to my next question, which is, what do large enterprises in general need to be doing now, need to be putting in place? The data will be one of them, taking those steps toward better, cleaner data to work with. But what else do people need to be doing, or large enterprises rather, need to be focusing on in order to make the best use out of automation and AI? And I will be coming to skills gradually, so skills would be a bit of this as well.
I think the previous session was on a maturity model for artificial intelligence, and we did a little in-house version, a cheap version, the same thing, you know, alpha, beta, gamma, 5 categories, but it was really helpful to use that capability to identify what changes need to happen within the organization in order to move towards adoption. And you know, sort of there's a prerequisite that is a data readiness that needs to be there. It doesn't do you any good in an organization if you don't know what data you have. If you know what data you have and you know what it means, then you're just about getting ready for it and so forth. And of course, there's the parallel lines around change, culture change within the organization and around the skills, which we'll get to. I remember the questions coming here somewhere. So in that space, I think that there's not a lot of things that have to shift. It's one of these questions about like disruption, okay? We had a debate at a dinner I went to the other night where we had to sort of pick sides. Are we being disrupted by AI? And I got on the, no, we're not. And my argument went along the lines that we're always being disrupted. AI is just the latest thing we're tripping over, okay? So we're actually quite adept as a species and a business culture and so forth at dealing with these ruptures in the way in which things happen. And every time it happens, it eventually gets better. It always hurts, and then it gets better. You know, the assembly line made things better. You know, the electricity made things better. Steam was great, but each time it was painful. And AI is the current one of those. Quantum is my favorite candidate for the next one. But those are things to come. And the thing about it is just sit back and do what we do, which is adapt.
Fantastic. Yeah, definitely. Adaptation is it's one of the top tips for young people. We'll get to that.
Well, we can't help it. It's the one thing as a species that we do better than any other.
Absolutely.
Now, everybody else has to evolve. Humans can adapt.
We're very lucky.
Good quote.
So, Rob, what do you think? What do you think people need to be putting in place right now in order to get the best
I mean,
value?
I mentioned before culture. That is hugely important.
Yeah.
I think giving people the ability to adapt and transform. Transformation is the hardest thing and particularly in banking, from my experience. If you look at, if I go back to the comment of, average age of some of this technology is 30 plus years old, you can imagine we've still got people around that, you suddenly start talking about robotics and AI and blockchain and all sorts of things, and they glaze over. So for me, I think the important thing is the tools and the support that organizations give to transform and turn off all this old stuff. Either run it in parallel, run it alongside, but really, how do you shut this down? And that's been a lot of the problem, is the business case. It's not the willingness of banks and financial institutions to adapt and change and embrace the latest technologies. They love it. I love it. I'm super excited by what's coming. But you have to turn off all the things of the past. Mm-hmm. And if I mention, even some basic things where you've got 130 systems, and some people have got thousands of systems in banks, and they all have been built up in a myriad spaghetti-like way over the years, is how you give the support and the culture to get that done and turned off as quickly as possible. And then, if your culture then is around transforming and it's around enhancing client experience, and you stay on that path, you'll be very good, I think.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Obviously, I agree with what the gentlemen have said. But I would say, first and foremost, stop thinking about these technologies as if they're business outcomes. Like, people don't walk into the SAP shop and say, I'll have 4 components of blockchain, 6 of AI, 4 of IoT. I wish they did, so my job would be very straightforward. I'm like, here we go. But instead, think about, how does it help me deliver the core board KPIs? How does it help me drive more return on shareholder value? How does it help me sell more shoes if I'm a shoe retailer? How does it help me manage plant capacity and usage? Yeah. How does it help me manage regulatory compliance? And we've got 2 highly regulated industries represented here, insurance and banking. If I had a pound for every time I had a customer tell me a story of how they've started to innovate on the edge with XYZ provider, and then gone to go, let's turn on the giant yellow switch or red switch, and realize, that would have brought me into direct conflict with the European banking regulator, I'd be a very rich woman indeed. So I think, honestly, I really would. Whoops. I've got lots of horror stories in this space that could also be shared at a fair market cost or price. But focusing on that business outcome and understanding that it's as important in this space to learn how and where to say no as it is to adopt these technologies. Mm-hmm. And also understanding that invested political capital, linking to Rob's point around the culture point, invested political capital is one of your biggest barriers to large-scale adoption and realization of the initial business case. Because the fact is, use of these intelligent technologies across the enterprise break down how value is created, measured, and realized. And they break down enterprise and functional silos. Now, in the business case and the nice shiny PowerPoint when you sign up to it, that sounds fantastic. We would love to do that. But when you're sitting, as I have been many times over the last few years, in the boardroom, looking at the great prototypes or POCs that are pilots that have been running and delivering record business results. And then you go, well, now, to deploy this, what we need is you, Mrs. COO, to reduce your scope of influence by this, you, Mr. CMO, to take on much more responsibility for this financial realization, and I could go on. And that's where you run into huge issues.
Absolutely.
So focus on the business outcome, learn to say no, and understand up front that this is really about business change and invested political capital in terms of your business case realization.
Excellent, lovely, thank you. Now, I am conscious of time at this point, so if we could get through that question quite quickly here, and then I'm going to give you one last question that I'm going to ask you to do really, really fast. So, what do people need to be doing right now, and then we'll have...
So realising it's not somebody else's job, and that this is pervasive across all departments of the organisation.
Fabulous. That was
What's that done then?
to finish it so quickly there. Okay, Chris, beat that for terseness.
Yes. I think, I mean, they've all hit on good points, and I think the key thing is, I'll say something bold, sometimes AI isn't the answer.
Yes, exactly.
And
yes.
so I think in reality, it comes back to business case. So is it better, cheaper, faster to do it with a human versus offshore human, onshore human, a robot, a piece of, or do we build it out, or do we simply just try and, don't do anything?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that's the
I
reality.
completely agree. Sometimes there can be a tendency to think that the complex is so fancy, but really it's not necessarily
don't be
the best
dazzled
answer.
by that.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we have 3 minutes left running on this clock, and I'm going to ask you one final question. I'm looking for your deepest wisdom here. So what you may have told your younger self, what you would advise somebody else, and I want you to cover off maybe skills in there, but anything that is going to be helpful to those that are going to be approaching the workplace in the future. Not right now, but in a while. What do they need to be or do?
So yeah, I like the way you phrased it. Of what advice would I give my younger self? The advice probably would be about keep going as you are, because what I did was I didn't bake myself into any one way of thinking. Kind of, okay, I was loosey-goosey and not very responsible, so that's probably part of it too. But that's the kind of thing that kids are facing now, younger people, is that they are coming out of university now with the expectation of 3 or 4 different jobs or more, 3 or 4 different careers. And the nature of the pace of technology, not just AI, but all the technologies that came before, are driving this kind of churn within our own experience of what we do for a living. So relax into it, keep going. Oh, and definitely, math, English, anything else doesn't matter. The rest is your choice, right? It's got to be math and English. You got to have language skills, and you got to be able to understand a few things about numbers. That'd be the only advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, it wouldn't be teaching kids rocket science, but it'd be data science. I think they've got to be able to navigate their way around data and understand things in a different way. And I guess, if you want to get deep and meaningful, I think the way that we teach kids now needs to change. And I think, you should also embrace other elements of arts and everything else into your curriculum to be able to be successful in the new digital age, would be my deep wisdom.
Super. Thank you very much for that.
I approach it from the opposite end of things, emotional and social intelligence. The end.
Yep.
Like those skills. I can't code.
That's true.
I'm very much on the business side of digital innovation, etc. But I like people and I can talk to them. And chill out. The world is always changing. Be curious, emotional and social intelligence, and do what you're passionate about, and it'll be fine.
Good advice. Okay. How about you, John?
So I think don't forget the old rules. Yeah, nothing happens until somebody buys something, and people tend to buy things that are making their lives simpler, easier, and cheaper. And don't forget the research. Listen to what customers, be they businesses or be they consumers, actually want. and spend time studying and differentiating yourself and your business based on knowing your customer more than your competition.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Last up, Chris. Finish it off with a bang, song, dance.
I'm ready.
Let's go.
I think the key bit about curiosity and what we want to learn, and one of the key things within the parliamentary discussion is we are on a track to learn how to go into a job.
Yes.
And fundamentally, what we're talking about is those jobs won't be around in the next 10 years. So be curious because you're on a lifelong learning journey. It doesn't finish at school. It starts when you can talk and read or even listen, and it finishes when you are, we go there, dark. But
Done.
I think learn to learn. I think the idea is don't necessarily become a rocket scientist, but understand what it means to be a rocket scientist and understand concepts and understand how to really understand yourself, basically.
Learn to learn, and I would add to that, love to learn. And learn to love to learn if you don't love to learn to start with.
Exactly.
Because you may as
Tongue
well.
twister.
Anyway, that has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. You've made this job very easy for me today. You've been great, and that was wonderful wisdom there toward the end. I'll be packaging that up now, selling it on. Thank you so much, and it's lunchtime, so enjoy lunch.